When I first met Emily, I thought I had everything figured out. I was in my early 30s, ambitious, driven, and convinced that success in life came down to one thing: achievement. I had my sights set on building a career that would make me someone to be proud of. But what I didn't realize was that in my relentless pursuit of success, I was slowly building a wall around the one thing that truly mattered: love. I had this belief, this bubble, that as long as I worked hard enough, as long as I made the right moves in my career, everything else would fall into place. I thought the job would provide the stability, the comfort, and the status. And in turn, I believed Emily would always be there by my side, waiting for me, understanding my drive. After all, wasn't that the way love was supposed to work? She loved me, and I loved her. But somehow, over the years, I stopped paying attention to what that really meant. It wasn't just the long hours at the office. It wasn't just the missed dinners or the weekends spent buried in spreadsheets. It was the emotional neglect, the unspoken words, the longing glances she gave me when I'd returned home too tired to even talk. Emily wasn't asking for much, but I was too focused on winning at life to notice her needs. My belief bubble told me that success in one area of my life would make everything else fall into place. And for a while, I lived in that bubble, convinced that it was all okay. I was working hard for our future, after all. But then the bubble burst. When Emily sat me down that night and told me she was unhappy, I was stunned. "I can't keep doing this," she said softly, tears in her eyes. "I don't want to be with someone who's never really here." At first, I didn't understand. I thought she was overreacting. She knew how hard I was working for us. I thought I was doing everything right. But as I looked into her eyes, something in me shifted. I realized that in my quest for success, I had lost sight of the most important thing of all, the one thing I had promised myself I would never neglect: love. The hardest part wasn't hearing her words. It wasn't even the anger I felt at first, the anger that I wasn't being understood. It was the crushing realization that I had failed her. I had failed us. I had been so blinded by my own aspirations that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. But it wasn't just about failure. It wasn't just about broken dreams or promises. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the breakup wasn't just a reflection of my mistakes, it was a reflection of my beliefs. My beliefs about what mattered, about success, about love. In that moment, I saw everything with new eyes. I wasn't just losing Emily, I was losing myself. I had to face the uncomfortable truth that my ideas about love, about how relationships should work, had been flawed all along. And if I wanted to get Emily back, I was going to have to change. This was the beginning of my journey, a journey that would force me to question everything I thought I knew about love, sacrifice, and what it really meant to be there for someone. And it all started with the collapse of that belief bubble, the moment when I realized that love, real love, can't be built on one person's dreams alone. It has to be built on a foundation of mutual care, respect, and presence. But as anyone who's been through heartbreak knows, this moment of clarity doesn't come easily. It's the beginning of something painful, and in some ways, it's just as much about loss as it is about growth. But I had to go through that pain to reach the other side. I had to tear down the walls I had built around my own heart. And in the process, I had to rebuild not just my relationship with Emily, but my entire understanding of love. The question was, could we come back from this? Could we rebuild what was lost? And more importantly, could I become the man Emily needed me to be? I didn't have the answers at the time, but one thing was certain: I wasn't going to give up without trying. And maybe, just maybe, this was the chance to rediscover the love that had been there all along. After Emily walked out that night, I was left sitting on the couch, staring at the empty space where she had just been. The silence in the room was deafening. At first, I couldn't even process what had happened. She said she was leaving, but why? What did she mean by saying I wasn't really there? I was right here, wasn't I? I was providing, planning, building a future for us. But as the hours ticked by, I realized that the real question wasn't about Emily, it was about me. When was the last time I truly listened to her? When had I set aside my work and just been present with her. The truth hit me like a freight train. I had been so focused on my ambitions, on building a life for us, that I had forgotten to actually live it. The days after she left were some of the hardest of my life. Every little thing reminded me of her. Her coffee mug sitting on the counter, her favorite blanket draped over the couch, the quiet absence of her laughter filling the spaces of our home. I tried to distract myself with work, burying myself in spreadsheets and meetings, but it didn't help. The more I tried to push the feelings away, the stronger they came back. And then there was the nagging voice in my head, telling me that maybe, just maybe, this was my fault. But the real turning point came when I spoke to her best friend, Claire. I had been avoiding reaching out to anyone close to Emily, partly out of shame and partly because I was afraid of what I might hear. But after days of sitting alone with my thoughts, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. I needed to understand what had gone wrong. When Claire picked up the phone, she didn't sound surprised to hear from me. In fact, it was almost as if she had been waiting for my call. "I'm glad you reached out," she said. "Because you need to hear this." She didn't sugarcoat anything. Claire told me how Emily had been feeling for months, maybe even years. How she felt invisible, like an afterthought in my life. How she had tried to tell me, in small ways, that she needed more, but I was too busy to notice. "She loved you," Claire said. "She still does. But love isn't enough if you're not willing to show up for her." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always thought of myself as a good partner, someone who provided stability and security. But Claire's words made me realize that I had been confusing providing with connecting. Emily didn't just need someone to pay the bills or plan for the future, she needed someone to be there with her. To share the little moments, the quiet evenings, the laughter and tears. But the most painful truth of all was this: Emily had been right. I wasn't really there. I was physically present, sure, but emotionally? I had checked out a long time ago. And now I was paying the price. The hardest part of that conversation wasn't hearing how I had hurt Emily. It was realizing that I had been living in a bubble of my own making. I had convinced myself that I was doing everything right, that I was being a good partner, when in reality, I had been neglecting the most important part of our relationship, the connection between us. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself replaying Claire's words over and over in my mind. It wasn't just about Emily, it was about me, about the kind of person I wanted to be. For so long, I had been focused on climbing the ladder, on achieving success, that I had forgotten what really mattered. And now, standing at the crossroads, I had to decide: was I willing to change? Or was I going to let the best thing in my life slip away? The days after the breakup were some of the loneliest I've ever experienced. I didn't know what to do with myself. I tried to keep busy, throwing myself into work, thinking that success would make me feel better, that it would fill the hole in my heart. But no amount of hours at the office could replace the presence of Emily. I could still see her in the little things, the way she used to make my coffee just the way I liked it, how she would always smile when she saw me, even if I'd had a terrible day. I thought about the way she had held me when I had a rough week, or how she believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I realized that love isn't just about the big moments, it's about all those small, everyday things that keep you connected. I had taken all that for granted, thinking she would always be there, but in reality, I hadn't made her feel valued. And now, she was gone. I was alone, and the silence was overwhelming. The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had made the right choice. Was letting her go the right thing? I feared that this was the beginning of something I couldn't fix, that I had ruined something beautiful, all for the sake of ambition and ego. A few months passed, and I thought I had moved on, or at least convinced myself that I had. But one afternoon, when I least expected it, I ran into Emily at a cafe. She looked different, stronger, more confident, and there was a quiet peace in her eyes. It was as though she had found herself again, away from the weight of our past. I didn't know how to react at first. Was this fate? Were we meant to meet again? We sat down and talked, not about the breakup, but about life. About the things we'd both done since then. It felt like no time had passed at all, but at the same time, it felt like everything had changed. She was different, and so was I. I could sense it in the way we interacted. The way we listened to each other, without the old tension hanging over us. There was no rush, no pressure to fix anything. We were two people trying to understand each other again. "I've missed this," she said, a smile playing on her lips. I didn't know if she was referring to our conversation or the time we spent together in the past. Either way, it hit me hard. The emotions I had buried were surfacing, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was looking at Emily, not just through the lens of our past but as the woman she had become. After a few more encounters, Emily and I had the conversation we needed. It wasn't about apologies or blaming anyone. It was about acknowledging how much we had grown apart but also how much we had grown as individuals. We both shared the lessons we had learned during our time apart, things we hadn't understood before. I realized that I was looking for someone to complete me, but I didn't even know who I was without you, I confessed. I was so focused on my career that I forgot to invest in you and in us. And I thought that as long as I worked hard, you'd always be there. But I was wrong. I lost sight of what truly matters. Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. And I realized I had been too dependent. I thought that being with you was the only way I'd find happiness, but I had to find it within myself first. I needed to be strong for me, not just for you. We both acknowledged the mistakes we had made, but there was no anger, no bitterness. Instead, there was mutual respect for the personal growth we had undergone. "Do you think we could ever try again?" I asked cautiously. Emily looked at me, a smile playing on her lips. "I think we could. But we need to be different this time. We need to be real with each other, no more pretending." As much as we both wanted to try again, there was still that lingering question: could we really make it work? I had hurt her, and she had hurt me. We weren't the same people we had been when we first fell in love, but that didn't mean we couldn't find our way back. The idea of starting over seemed impossible, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that love is never perfect. It's never about being flawless. It's about being willing to work through the flaws together. We talked for hours about the future, about what we wanted, and how we would handle the challenges we had never dealt with before. The old ways of avoiding conflict and hoping things would improve on their own weren't going to cut it anymore. We needed to communicate better, to support each other in ways we hadn't before. The question wasn't whether we could make it work, it was whether we were willing to try. And after everything, we decided that we were. The decision wasn't instant, but it was firm. We both agreed that we weren't going to rush into anything, but we would take our time to rediscover each other. We weren't looking for the same relationship we had before, because we both knew it had its flaws. What we wanted was something new, a fresh start with the wisdom and understanding that came with the time apart. "I'm ready," I said, looking at Emily with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. "I'm ready to try again, but this time, I'm going to be present. I'm going to put you first, and I'm going to be the partner you deserve." "I'm ready too," she replied, her voice steady. "But only if we can be real with each other." And with that, we took the first step toward rebuilding what we had lost. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but it was real. And in the end, that's what made all the difference. Even after Emily and I made the decision to try again, there were still a lot of emotions to process. The past didn't just disappear because we decided to move forward. There was so much pain from the years of neglect, the silence that had filled our home, and the feeling that we had failed each other. I started to wonder if we could ever really escape the shadow of the past. Could we forgive ourselves for what had happened? For the lies we told ourselves and the truths we avoided? The emotional turmoil weighed heavily on me. I wasn't sure how much of the past was still buried in me, waiting to resurface. One night, after a quiet dinner, we had a long conversation about everything: the mistakes, the feelings, the brokenness. I felt like I was tearing open old wounds, but I needed to. We both needed to. "Do you think we'll ever really get past it?" I asked, my voice cracking a little. Emily took a deep breath. I don't know, Mark. But I do know that I can't keep carrying this alone. I need you to be with me, really be with me. And for the first time in months, I realized that emotional healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about acknowledging the pain and learning to carry it together. We both had scars, but they didn't have to define us. We knew that trust wouldn't come back overnight. The wounds of betrayal, neglect, and silence took time to heal. But we started to rebuild that trust, piece by piece, day by day. It wasn't just about the big gestures, it was the little things that counted the most. A text in the middle of the day just to say, I'm thinking of you. A phone call to talk about nothing and everything. Sitting on the couch together without feeling like we were worlds apart. We also had to change the way we communicated. No more passive-aggressive silences or assumptions. If something bothered me, I had to say it. If something bothered Emily, she had to speak up. And slowly but surely, we started understanding each other better. I think we're starting to get it right, Emily said one night, holding my hand as we watched the sunset. I hope so, I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. We're learning, and that's all I can ask for. Together, we learned to forgive, not just each other, but ourselves. It was like we were giving ourselves permission to be imperfect, to be vulnerable. And that made all the difference. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Emily and I found ourselves growing closer than we had been in years. It wasn't always easy, but there was something different now, something real. The foundation of our relationship wasn't built on the idea of perfection anymore, but on understanding and effort. We started going on weekend trips, just the two of us, rediscovering the joy of each other's company without the pressures of daily life. We laughed more, we talked more, and we listened more. It felt like we were falling in love all over again, but this time with a deeper sense of maturity and respect. One evening, while we were sitting at our favorite restaurant, Emily looked at me with a soft smile. You know, she said, I'm glad we didn't give up. We've both come so far. I smiled back, feeling a sense of pride. Me too. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. We didn't have all the answers. We didn't know what the future held. But we knew one thing for sure, we had each other, and we were willing to fight for what we had. And for the first time in a long time, that felt enough. As our relationship strengthened, something else began to shift in me. For years, I had prioritized my career above everything else. I thought that success and status were the keys to happiness, but now I realized that it was love, trust, and companionship that truly mattered. I started to question the decisions I had made in the past. How many late nights at the office had I missed out on time with Emily? How many moments had I let slip by because I was too focused on building my empire? I had worked so hard to make something of myself, but in the process, I had almost lost the most important thing in my life. I took a step back from the grind. I made a conscious effort to balance my career with my personal life. I took more time off, spent more weekends at home, and even started planning vacations where I could fully disconnect from work. You know, I think you've finally found the right balance, Emily said one day, smiling as we walked through the park. I think I have, I said, feeling a sense of contentment I hadn't felt in years. Looking back on everything, I can see how far we've come. We've been through so much together, heartbreak, mistakes, regrets. But we've also grown together, learning to love in ways we never thought possible. We aren't the same people we were when we first met, but in many ways, that's the beauty of it. We've learned, evolved, and discovered new depths to our love, and now, I see the future with a clarity I never had before. I no longer measure success by the size of my paycheck or the accolades I receive at work. Success, to me, is the peace I feel when I'm with Emily, the trust we've rebuilt, and the life we're creating together. Do you think we've finally figured it out? I asked Emily one evening, watching the stars together. I think we're getting there, she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. One day at a time. And with that, I realized that the real dream wasn't the one I had been chasing for years. It was the dream of a love that endures, one that withstands the trials of time and change, and comes out stronger on the other side.